I had always thought one of the greatest perks of buying my little house was the fact that it stood outside the borders of the local homeowners association. That was intentional. I'd grown up watching neighbors argue about whether a fence was too high or whether Christmas lights could stay up past January 2nd. When I bought my place, a modest 2-bedroom ranch with a patchy lawn and a big oak tree shading the porch, I told myself, never again will I live under the tyranny of bored suburban bureaucrats. Life was peaceful. My dog, Max, loved to run the fence line and bark at squirrels. I had a shed out back painted a bright, unapologetic blue. And my mailbox? Well, it leaned slightly to the left after a delivery truck clipped it last winter. To me, those little imperfections were the charm of home ownership. To my neighbor Karen, however, they were a declaration of war. Karen didn't even live on my street. She was 2 blocks away, in the heart of her precious HOA. But she was the president of that HOA, or rather, she declared herself to be the president, as though she had been divinely anointed for the role. She patrolled the surrounding area with a clipboard tucked under her arm like a sheriff in some lawless town. Everyone knew her. Everyone avoided her. The first time she came to my house, I thought she was selling something. She marched across my lawn in her pressed khaki shorts and bright visor, rapping on my door like she had a warrant. "Hello," she said in that tone people use when they're about to tell you you've done something wrong. "I'm Karen, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." "Nice to meet you," I said cautiously, half expecting her to hand me a flyer about a block party or a lost cat. Instead, she pulled a sheet from her clipboard and waved it at me. "You'll want to look this over. You're in violation of several HOA standards. Your mailbox is crooked, your lawn exceeds 3 inches in certain places, and frankly, the paint on that shed, well, let's just say it's not community appropriate." I blinked at her, then laughed. "You must be mistaken. I don't live in your HOA. My deed is clean, no covenants, no bylaws. I bought this place because of that." Her smile tightened. "We consider this area within our jurisdiction." "You consider it," I repeated. "But the law doesn't. I'm not part of your HOA." Her eyes narrowed as though I'd just insulted her personally. She tapped her clipboard with her pen, a staccato sound like a woodpecker drilling into my sanity. "We'll see about that." And with that, she spun on her heel and marched away, muttering something about standards and people these days. I thought it was over. After all, how could someone possibly enforce HOA rules outside of their HOA? It was laughable. I even told my buddy Mark about it over beers later that night. "Don't worry about her," he said, smirking. "Karen's all bark and no bite. She tried to tell me last year that my truck wasn't aesthetically harmonious with the neighborhood. I reminded her that I don't even live on her street." We both laughed, shaking our heads at how seriously some people take suburban politics. But Karen wasn't like most people. Karen had time, and worse, Karen had obsession. 2 weeks later, it came. A thick envelope shoved into my mailbox, stamped with bold red letters, "Urgent legal matter. Open immediately." Inside was a formal complaint. Karen, on behalf of the Willow Creek HOA, was suing me for non-compliance. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the papers, flipping through pages of bylaws that had nothing to do with me. They cited things like acceptable mailbox design, mandatory grass height, and restrictions against unapproved exterior paint colors. She even included photographs, grainy shots of my shed and lawn, like evidence in some petty crime drama. Max wagged his tail at my feet, completely oblivious. I rubbed my temples. "Buddy, we're being sued for existing." That night, I couldn't help but imagine Karen at her dining table, carefully assembling the lawsuit like a kid piecing together a scrapbook, probably sipping chamomile tea and feeling righteous. Maybe she even cackled when she sealed the envelope, convinced she'd finally cornered me. The absurdity made me laugh, but only for a moment. Lawsuits weren't a joke. Even frivolous ones took time, money, and energy to deal with. And that was exactly what Karen wanted. To wear me down. To scare me into compliance. I set the papers down and stared out the window at the crooked mailbox she hated so much. Was this really happening? Was I about to spend my summer battling a woman who didn't even have authority over me? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. Saw Karen earlier. She was bragging about cleaning up the neighborhood. What's she up to now? I snapped a photo of the lawsuit packet and sent it to him. Seconds later, he called me, laughing so hard he could barely talk. She actually did it? Oh man. You're gonna destroy her in court. I chuckled, but there was a knot forming in my stomach. I didn't like conflict. I wanted a quiet life with my dog, my shed, and my mailbox. But Karen had kicked down the door to my peace, and now she'd dragged me into her world. I closed the packet, exhaled slowly, and said out loud to no one but Max. All right then. If she wants a fight, she's going to get one. The morning after Karen's little love letter landed on my doorstep, I sat at my kitchen table with a pot of coffee, a stack of highlighters, and the world's most ridiculous lawsuit spread out in front of me. It felt surreal, like I'd accidentally wandered into a parody of Law Order, HOA Unit. The documents were thick with jargon, citations, and page after page of HOA bylaws, none of which had the faintest connection to me. There was even an index. An index! This woman had clearly spent hours compiling the thing, and the effort almost impressed me. Almost. The more I read, the more absurd it became. According to Karen's complaint, I was guilty of 1. Mailbox misalignment. Apparently, Section 4.2.3 of the Willow Creek HOA bylaws required all mailboxes to be upright, polished, and painted in community-approved colors. Mine leaned slightly left and was plain black. A felony in her eyes. 2. Unauthorized lawn height. Section 6.1.2 required grass be trimmed no higher than 3 inches. She had photographic evidence of mine, complete with a ruler stuck in the ground like she'd staged a crime scene. 3. Prohibited paint color. Section 7.3.1 required all external structures to be earth-toned. My shed, proudly painted a vivid blue, was her Exhibit C. 4. Public nuisance. Canine disturbance. Section 8.4.2 prohibited excessive animal noise. She claimed my dog Max barked relentlessly. Max, who was currently asleep on the couch snoring softly, was apparently a criminal mastermind. If I hadn't been the target, I would have laughed until my sides hurt. Instead, I sat back, rubbed my temples, and muttered, "This is insane." The worst part wasn't the accusations themselves. It was the realization that Karen wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what she was doing. Lawsuits, even ridiculous ones, meant court dates, filings, and potentially hiring a lawyer. Even if she had no case, she could drag me through the mud, costing me money and time. That's when I remembered my friend Jake. He wasn't just a buddy from college. He was also a lawyer. The kind of lawyer who thrived on dismantling weak arguments like a kid pulling wings off flies. I called him immediately. "Hey man," he answered groggily. "You better not be calling me before 9 unless you've been arrested." "Not arrested," I said, "but I might as well be. My neighbor just sued me for breaking HOA rules, and I'm not even in her HOA." There was a pause, then a loud laugh. "Wait, what? Back up. Start from the top." I explained everything. The clipboard ambush, the thick lawsuit packet, the absurd list of complaints. By the end, Jake was wheezing with laughter. "She's suing you for grass height?" he managed between chuckles. Wow, that's next-level Karen energy. Don't worry, this is the legal equivalent of a house of cards in a wind tunnel. She has no jurisdiction." I felt relief, but also anger. Still, she filed it, which means I have to respond, right? "Yeah, but don't panic," Jake said. "Send me the paperwork. We'll hit her with a motion to dismiss. Hell, we could even counterclaim for harassment if you want to play offense. People like her count on intimidation, not facts." The knot in my stomach loosened. Finally, I had a plan. That evening, I sat with my deeds spread out on the table, alongside old plat maps I'd pulled from the county clerk's website. There it was in black and white. This property is not subject to Willow Creek HOA covenants. It was like holding Excalibur. I almost wanted to frame it and hang it over the fireplace. Still, Karen wasn't done. Over the next 2 days, she made herself busy. First, she walked past my house no fewer than 6 times in one afternoon, pausing dramatically to take photos of my yard as if she were documenting a crime scene. Once, she even crouched with her ruler again, measuring my grass. I opened the window and called out, "Careful, Karen, that ruler's not HOA approved." She glared, scribbled something on her clipboard, and stormed off. Second, she cornered my neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, a sweet retired teacher who mostly kept to herself. I overheard Karen telling her in a loud whisper, "Don't worry, we'll get rid of him soon. He's bringing down property values." Mrs. Ellis glanced at me, mortified, and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Third, Karen started a smear campaign on the neighborhood Facebook group. I didn't have an account, but Mark texted me screenshots. She wrote posts like, "Some people think they can live here without respecting community standards. We must protect our neighborhood from those who refuse to cooperate." The comments were a mix of confused residents and people asking, "Wait, doesn't he live outside the HOA?" It was equal parts infuriating and hilarious. By the end of the second day, I realized something. Karen thought she was untouchable. She truly believed that her binder of bylaws could override property deeds and county maps. She saw herself as judge, jury, and executioner of Willow Creek. But she had underestimated one thing. I wasn't going to roll over. That night, Jake called again. "Okay, I've drafted your response. We'll file tomorrow." And I added a counterclaim. Harassment, trespassing, and frivolous litigation. She's going to regret picking this fight. For the first time since the lawsuit arrived, I smiled. The paper walls of her case were already crumbling, and she didn't even know it. Karen wanted a war of attrition. But me? I was preparing for a surgical strike. When the court notice arrived, it gave me exactly 3 days to prepare before the hearing. 3 days. That was all the time I had to turn Karen's fantasy lawsuit into her worst nightmare. Most people would have panicked, and truthfully, for a moment, I did. I stared at the notice, heart pounding, imagining standing in front of a judge while Karen waved her binder of HOA bylaws like the 10 Commandments. But then I remembered something Jake said. People like her count on intimidation, not facts. Facts, luckily, were on my side. Day 1, counterattack. The first step wasn't defense, it was offense. Karen thought she could bury me in paper, but 2 could play that game. Jake filed a counterclaim immediately: harassment, trespassing, and frivolous litigation. He laid it out in crisp legalese. Karen had repeatedly entered my property without permission, harassed me and my neighbors, and filed a lawsuit with no legal foundation. I thought filing would be a simple digital form. Instead, it was a storm of PDFs, notarizations, and signatures. But I didn't care. Every click felt like loading ammunition. That afternoon, I stepped outside with Max. Sure enough, Karen was power walking past my house again, phone camera out, recording my lawn like she was filming a crime documentary. "Smile for discovery," I called cheerfully. Her jaw clenched and she marched off without a word. That was the moment I knew she had no idea I was already hitting back. Day 2, building the wall. The second day was for evidence. I dug up everything. Property deed? Check. Plat maps showing the exact border of Willow Creek HOA's jurisdiction? Check. County zoning records? Double check. Each document clearly proved I was not, by any stretch of imagination, under their governance. But why stop there? I decided to go further. I printed out screenshots of Karen's posts from the neighborhood Facebook group where she smeared me. I got a signed affidavit from Mrs. Ellis, who witnessed Karen trespassing onto my lawn with her measuring ruler. And then, the jackpot, 2 other neighbors, the Johnsons and the Rodriguezes, volunteered to testify. "She's been harassing us for years," Mrs. Johnson said over the phone. "She tried to fine us for having a basketball hoop in the driveway. We don't even live on her street. If you're taking her to court, we'll back you up." The Rodriguezes told me she once threatened to report their kid's lemonade stand for unlicensed vending. They were practically giddy to finally have a chance to speak out. By the end of the day, I had a binder of my own, thicker than Karen's, but filled with real legal weight instead of petty power trips. Day 3. Fire and focus. The third day wasn't about paperwork. It was about preparation. Jake came over with coffee and sat at my dining table as we went through mock questions. "Judge will probably ask you simple things first," he said. "Do you live within Willow Creek HOA? You say no. Then you show your deed. Easy." "And if Karen interrupts me?" I asked. He smirked. "Let her. The more she rants, the more she looks like a tyrant." That afternoon, I walked the yard with Max. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel annoyed about the crooked mailbox or the patchy grass. I felt proud. This wasn't just a lawn anymore. It was a battlefield. And in less than 24 hours, I'd be defending it. Karen, meanwhile, was ramping up. She paraded down the street with her binder tucked under her arm like it was a holy relic. She even stopped Mark, who was washing his truck, and loudly declared, "Tomorrow, the neighborhood takes its stand against disorder." Mark texted me later. "She's acting like it's the Super Bowl. You better crush her." The night before. I couldn't sleep much that night. Max curled up at the foot of the bed while I lay awake, rehearsing arguments in my head. "Your Honor, my property deed clearly states, as you can see from Exhibit A, respectfully, The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand wooden panels or echoing chambers, just a modest space with beige walls, fluorescent lights, and a faint smell of stale coffee. But for me, it might as well have been an arena. Across the aisle sat Karen, perfectly coiffed, lips pressed tight, her HOA binder balanced on her lap like a weapon. She looked smug, confident, almost giddy. The judge walked in, a tired-looking man with silver hair and a no-nonsense air. He glanced at the docket, sighed, and said, "All right, let's get started. Willow Creek Homeowners Association versus..." He squinted at the papers. "Mr. Carter?" I rose. "Yes, Your Honor." Karen sprang up as well. "And I am here, Your Honor, representing Willow Creek HOA as president." The judge gave her a flat look. "Are you a licensed attorney?" Her smile wavered. "Well, no, but as HOA president, Sit down. You can present your case, but don't play lawyer." That was strike one. Karen's rant. When given the floor, Karen unleashed a speech she'd clearly rehearsed in the mirror. "Your Honor, this man has flagrantly violated our community standards. His mailbox is crooked, his lawn is unkempt, and his shed is painted in a garish, offensive blue. He allows his dog to bark at all hours. These behaviors degrade property values and disturb the harmony of Willow Creek. We have bylaws, and those bylaws must be respected." She slapped her binder on the table for dramatic effect. Pages rattled. Somewhere behind me, someone chuckled. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, before we get into details, can you point me to the document that shows your HOA has jurisdiction over Mr. Carter's property?" Karen flipped furiously through her binder, papers whispering like dry leaves. It's understood. The entire neighborhood falls under our governance." "Understood by whom?" the judge asked dryly. Karen sputtered. By everyone. It's common knowledge." The judge sighed. "Do you have any deed, covenant, or municipal record showing authority over his lot?" She froze. Pages shuffled. Nothing. Strike two. My turn. When it was my turn, I stood calmly, sliding a folder across to the judge. "Your Honor, here is my deed, signed and recorded with the county. It explicitly states my property is not subject to Willow Creek HOA covenants. I also have plat maps and zoning records confirming the same." The judge flipped through the papers, nodding. "I see. Yes, this property is clearly outside HOA jurisdiction." Karen leapt up. But look at his shed. That blue is an eyesore. And the mailbox. It leans. He's bringing down property values." The judge gave her a look sharp enough to cut steel. Ma'am, you cannot enforce aesthetic preferences on a property that does not belong to your association. Sit down. She sat, face flushed red, lips pressed so tight they nearly disappeared. I continued. Furthermore, Your Honor, Ms. Karen has repeatedly trespassed onto my property to take measurements and photographs without permission. She has harassed me and my neighbors, and she has attempted to use frivolous litigation to intimidate me. For those reasons, I filed a counterclaim. The judge glanced at Jake, who was seated beside me now, nodding like a cat who'd cornered a mouse. Yes, I see the counterclaim here. Harassment, trespass, legal fees. Any supporting evidence? I handed over affidavits signed by Mrs. Ellis and the Johnsons. 3 neighbors have provided sworn statements confirming her behavior. I also have screenshots of social media posts where she smeared me publicly. The judge skimmed, then leaned back in his chair with a long, weary sigh. This is absurd. The verdict. After a pause, the judge straightened. Here's my ruling. The plaintiff's case is dismissed with prejudice. The HOA has no jurisdiction over this property, period. Furthermore, the defendant's counterclaim for harassment is upheld. Ms. Karen, you are ordered to pay Mr. Carta